Transmissions from Hawaii.
We have chicken paintings, we have chicken magnets, we have chicken pottery, we have chicken postcards, we have chicken,
That's the voice of Joanna Carolyn, and aside from being a longtime resident of the island of Kauai, she's also the owner of Banana Patch Studio, an art studio with multiple locations on Kauai.
Oh, let's see, I think I said note cards, greeting cards, pottery spoon rests, mugs. You name it, we got the chicken stuff.
Joanna opened up shop in 1991, and since then, she's been selling a wide variety of products made on the island, including ceramic tiles, pottery, and fine art. But yes, she also does have quite a few products inspired by Kauai's famous, or depending on who you ask, infamous wild chickens.
You know, they're just one of those things that people notice coming from the mainland. They just get a kick out of chickens pretty much being everywhere. So it's, and I think when living here, you just get used to them. So it's not as much of a novelty.
It's not at all an exaggeration to say that there's chickens pretty much everywhere on Kauai. In fact, when you're walking around on any given day on the island, you're bound to run into 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 chickens because there's just so many of them. And often when visitors arrive on the island, it ends up being one of the very first things that they notice as soon as they get out of the airport.
I was at the airport one time, and this guy was telling a story about how he got off the plane on Kauai, and right there at the end of the road when you come out of the airport is a Kentucky Fried Chicken, and he just thought it was the funniest thing that the whole parking lot was full of chickens. And so he was kind of telling this story at the top of his voice, and and laughing hysterically at how the irony of.
Hello, my name is Tony Vega. I'm the editor-in-chief of Wasabi Magazine, as well as the producer of this show. And on this, the very first episode of Transmissions from Hawaii, we are talking about a fascinating aspect of life on the island of Kauai. So, Kauai is known for its natural beauty, as well as, yes, those chickens we were talking about. And today we are digging deep into that topic. We're covering everything from funny chicken stories to what happens when these chickens become a problem, and what science has to teach us about the origins of these interesting little creatures. So stay tuned. Let's begin by talking to someone who's heard more than her fair share of interesting chicken stories.
I'm Pamela Aulea Varma, and I am the writer and also the publisher of Kauai Stories and Kauai Stories 2, both of which are collections of about 50 stories apiece about people's lives on the island of Kauai.
Volume 1 of Kauai Stories actually has an entire section dedicated to stories about chickens in it. And so when I found this out, I picked up the phone and gave Pamela a call.
One of the first types of stories I decided to gather was chicken anecdotes.
So, of course, yeah, that's where I was going to go with my question.
Yeah,
so.
It's funny when you called me, I didn't recollect that actually is one of the places I started. Most of the stories in my books are like mini biographies, so you can really get to know people.
Yeah.
But I knew I wanted a section in my first book about Kauai chickens. They're such a feature of this island that I knew people would have some really great anecdotes. So I sent an email to the vast majority of people in my personal address book. So some were friends, some were business acquaintances. And I said, tell me your chicken anecdotes. How do you feel about Kauai's chickens? I sent that email about probably 9 p.m. one night. By 10 p.m., my email box was blowing up. And by the next morning, it was insane. And then the following morning, I was meeting some people for breakfast at a small restaurant here. And there was a line. The place was real popular, so you had to wait in line to place your order. We're all standing in line, and people were passing me in line as they're getting to their place in line, talking to me about the chicken stories. Hey, I have one for you. I'm going to email it to you. So just, when you're a writer, you think you're like kind of anonymous because you're, at home with your computer and you're just doing your thing and you're, in your own head and just moving words around on the computer. And then you go out in public, you find out what touched a chord. And what I found is, not surprisingly, that Kauai people have a love-hate relationship with our island's chickens. Some people love them, some people hate them. Uh-huh. And the people who love them really love them.
Yeah.
And the people who hate them can't wait to get rid of them, which unfortunately for them is probably not going to happen anytime soon.
Yeah. So would you say like anybody that's been there any significant amount of time seems to have their own chicken story?
Yeah, I would say the vast majority of us have chicken stories. It can be as simple as going up to Waimea Canyon or Kokee. As soon as you park your car and you open the door to get out, at most of the lookouts, chickens come up to your door because they're used to visitors feeding them potato chips or Fritos or whatever. Uh-huh. So even if you have no intent of feeding them, they're right there by the side of your door. And some of us start thinking, what do I have in my car I can give them? And it runs the gamut from that all the way to people who've adopted chickens and these chickens have become pets of theirs.
Having gotten so many submissions and heard so many stories, I had to ask Pamela if she had any favorites.
So this guy comes home from work I can't remember where he was working, but at the time he came home like midnight or later. Mm-hmm. And he was living in a shack in an area of the island called Moloa'a. He came down the driveway and he said, usually the chickens were still pecking around and very perky. But this night, as he came down the driveway, all the chickens were lying on the side of the driveway. He couldn't figure out what was going on. And so he gets out of the car and there were some that were kind of standing in front of where he needed to drive, sort of in a stupor, and they wouldn't move out of the way of the car, which is really unusual for chickens. Sometimes they're slow getting out of the way, but they usually move. These would not move. He actually had to get up and, push them, lift them out of the way. Didn't know what to make of it. And it was late at night, so he went in his place and went to sleep. In the morning when he came out, he noticed that there were a lot of half-eaten rotten mangoes under the tree where most of the chickens were. So they had apparently eaten fermented mangoes and gotten drunk. And his punchline is, it was a strangely quiet morning. So that's one of my favorites.
Besides the funny stories, though, Pamela also made sure to include some really heartwarming tales about people's relationships with chickens.
People I've spoken to and written about who really love chickens have told me they make wonderful pets. That they come when you call them. They're really loving. They respond to sounds, like if you scrape like if you feed, I don't know what they feed them, if it's cat food or what they feed them. If you scrape the can, they know that sound and they'll come running, and that they're really loyal. So, and they've heard a lot of stories of chickens, adult chickens fostering other animals like bunnies and kittens. And one of my neighbors had one of the sons brought home a baby chicken, and the chicken would nest in with the bunnies in the cage. I think he thought the bunnies were his mom, or mom and dad.
So cute.
So, yeah, I guess it's like any other, we're accustomed to bringing home cats and dogs. Yeah. But why couldn't a chicken be just as loving as any other animal? And that's what people experience. They share those stories with me.
Being that Pamela has been living on Kauai since 1988, she's had her own fair share of interesting experiences with the local chickens. But this one easily takes the cake as the most memorable one.
One day, my office has been in my home for more than 20 years. So one day, I'm talking to one of my larger clients on the phone, and thank God he was born and raised in Hawaii. And he has a lot of investment, so I'm definitely trying to be an adult and have an adult conversation with him.
Sure.
And out of the corner of my eye, I see that one of my cats has brought in an adolescent chicken and has carried it into the closet of the room where my office was.
Oh my gosh.
So I'm thinking, and as I said, that cats normally don't go after adolescent chickens, but for some reason this cat was really after this chicken, and I didn't want to see carnage happen at all, and certainly not in my office. So I'm trying to nonchalantly carry on this conversation with my client while rescuing this chicken.
Uh-huh.
So fortunately I had a cordless headset at the time. So I'm able to walk around, leave my desk, and I walk over to the chicken and I'm trying to shoo it out of the office towards the door of my office, which led to the outside. So the chicken could just go run outside and run in the field and be safe. And every time I try to shoo the chicken that way, poor little bird brain going the opposite direction. And the cat is going, yeah, this is working in my favor. So I'm still trying to do this and make full sentences for the client. And finally I said, I'm going to have to go because I have a chicken in my office and I'm trying to get it out before the cat hurts it. And it's not going on its own. And right then the cat sinks its claw into the back of the chicken and the chicken goes, Wah! And my client goes, I think you better go now.
Wow.
And the client's a Haole guy born and raised in Hawaii. And thank God, because if he had not been born and raised here, I don't know what he would have thought about my professionalism.
Yeah.
And that was probably 20 years ago, and he's still my client. And I did get that chicken out the door.
By the way, Pamela and I did discuss whether she knows anyone that's actually eaten one of Kauai's wild chicken.
I had a friend years ago who grew up in the Midwest. He was here on Kauai, still is here on Kauai. But where he grew up in the Midwest, he was a trapper. So he and a bunch of people in his region would hike through mountains and trap animals to eat them. They survived on that. Mm-hmm. So one day, he and a friend here on Kauai thought, well, what if we just catch one of these chickens and barbecue it? Mm-hmm. So they did. They went through the whole process of plucking the feathers and getting it ready for cooking. And they cooked it. And no matter how long they cooked it, it never got soft. Uh-huh. They said it was very flavorful, but really sinewy and chewy.
Huh.
So it's just kind of a reminder, like, the chickens we buy in the grocery store, they are bred to be meaty and fluffy and not sinewy. And they're also not having to run around to save their lives like a wild chicken.
Yeah. I remember there was one little anecdote in the book that involved a recipe, right? And the punchline was kind of like, you boil the chicken with a rock and then you throw out the chicken and you're left with the rock.
Exactly. Eat the rock. It's more tender. Yeah, exactly. If you're cooking a wild Kauai chicken, that's what they say.
Right.
Yeah. I don't know too many people who've tried it, but that friend of mine who was the trapper and the hunter, he was really experienced at that from his Midwest upbringing. So I thought if anybody could have made that chicken edible, it would have been him. And he said it was a serious no-go. He says, I'm not going to do that again. I remember saying, I don't care how little money I have, I'm not eating a Kauai chicken again.
To close out our conversation, I asked Pamela one last question. How would she feel if the chickens were to just disappear one day?
I would be disappointed. I would be really bummed out. They are a part of Kauai life, and as I said, they were a canoe animal. Mm-hmm. They came over with the ancient Polynesians 1,500 years ago. So I love that historical connection as well. Mm-hmm. And some of the chickens, especially the roosters, are really beautiful.
Yeah.
And most of us who live on Kauai, we prefer the things that give us the rural lifestyle. If we wanted to live in Honolulu or Los Angeles or Chicago or New York, we would. The vast majority of us on Kauai are here because we want to be, and we've chosen this life and this lifestyle. So I love the ruralness of it, of having chickens run by. I think it's funny. They sometimes do really funny things. Like, have you ever watched a chicken try to fly? They do fly.
I've seen them flap their wings and kind of fly.
Yeah, it's not attractive. That's not their forte, let's put it that way. But they can. Things like that, it makes me laugh. I love things, funny, quirky things like that anywhere, but especially on the island of Kauai. The quirky things, along with the beauty and the wonderful people here on Kauai, the quirky things are some of the things that help me really appreciate Kauai as home. It's totally not generic here. And if we lost our chickens, we'd be just a notch more generic.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't want to see that happen.
Yeah.
And fortunately, I don't know how that could ever happen because we've got a lot of chickens.
That's what I hear, yeah. For more stories about chickens, as well as just general life on Kauai, make sure to pick up a copy of Kauai Stories. Volume 1 and Volume 2 are out now, and you can find more information at kauaistories.net. Next up, we're going to find out who people call when chickens become a problem. But that's after this quick break. If you're enjoying the show, then good news, because we are working on more episodes. Just make sure to subscribe on your podcast app so you don't miss them when they come out. And if you want to make sure that we can turn this show into something that is sustainable over the long term, then please recommend it to a friend. Tell your auntie, tell your uncle, tell your cousin, tell your friend, tell anybody who is at all interested in podcasts or stories about Hawaii. And if you know somebody that might be into it but doesn't know what a podcast is, then why not explain it to them? Or just tell them that they can go to transmissionsfromhawaii.com and listen to it there. You can also find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Just look us up, Transmissions from Hawaii. And if you really want to make sure to stay in touch and keep up to date with all the latest developments with the show, then sign up for our email newsletter at transmissionsfromhawaii.com/newsletter. As much as the chickens have become a beloved icon of life on Kauai, they do cause some problems from time to time. Sometimes it's just roosters crowing at all hours of the day and night, and other times it's actual property damage. So who do people call when they need some help with the chickens? Well, one person they call is Janoan Young.
Hello.
Joint owner and account manager at Kani Wildlife Control. Kauai, of course, is famous for the chickens, and being that you deal with wildlife, I assume you guys must get a few calls for chickens?
Yes, absolutely.
About how frequently would you say that you get calls related specifically to chickens?
Gosh, it's hard to say the exact number of calls that we get, but I can tell you we get it from every type of customer, whether it's the hotel industry, the restaurant industry, agricultural areas, gardens and growers, residents who can't sleep. Typically, the complaints come from people who don't have air conditioning, and then they hear the chickens in the night. Right. And probably one of the biggest of the residential complaints comes from where you have one neighbor who doesn't like the chickens, and then you have the neighbor next door who feeds them and brings them in and welcomes them 2 or 3 times a day with regular feedings. So it definitely presents a challenge in the sense that you have the people who love them and the people who hate them.
Definitely, yeah. So what is the procedure then for that sort of job? Do you have to trap the chickens?
Our primary control method is through trapping. We do the best that we can with trapping. We're not ever going to get rid of all of the chickens, but at least if we can reduce the population, that works good. We also have some active trapping where we go out and our WCOs are trained to catch the chickens, and usually we're not even seen and just kind of out of sight, out of mind. But they can take the chickens. They're just good at what they do, and they can take the chicken. And especially in the restaurants, the chickens are so used to being fed that We can change the color of our shirt because if they know that we're there to get them, they recognize faces, they recognize shirt colors, and so then we'll have to go in undercover and pose as a tourist and
Really?
feed the chicken, and then we're able to capture it live that way.
Oh, wow. That's interesting. Undercover.
Yeah, so chickens have really good facial recognition, and they can recall about 25 faces at a time. And that's why once you've, squirted a chicken with water, a lot of restaurant workers do things like that to try and deter them from jumping on tables. But once you do something with the chicken sees as a threat, the chicken recognizes your face and knows who you are.
Wow. Do you guys actually like set traps? Is that easy? Because sometimes you hear about animals like they can recognize the trap and then they don't go near it.
Yeah, chickens they're really good with facial recognition, but they're not too good with traps.
Gotcha. I was reading somewhere that there are sometimes when you trap the chickens, you take them into like the more like forested areas. Is that what you guys do?
We actually very rarely would do something like that. We are a strong believer that there has to be balance, and we're in no way looking to get rid of the chickens. It definitely brings its own touch to the island and is, part of what makes Kauai Kauai. But at the same time, there are areas that are there's just too many.
Sure.
And there is a health concern with it. And I can tell you, we were working a school recently, and the chickens had just, it's an easy place for chickens to be fed. It's a large campus. There's trees for roosting. It's just a great place for chickens to live. But they were roosting in the water fountains that the kids were drinking out of. And so all the droppings were in the water fountain. Gotcha. And just a disgusting situation for the students in the school and from a health perspective. So anyway, as much as we do like the chickens and we see the need for balance, we don't just release them. But with that being said, we do want to have a purpose for them, and we have several people who really like the chickens and like to eat them. And we have a holding facility where we where we relocate the chickens that we catch, and we feed them for about 30 days. And we just do standard scratch feed. It's about $10 a bag from the store. We feed them that for about a month, and after that, the chicken, it tastes better. I'm sure you've heard the stories about cooking a lava rock, and the lava rock, when the lava rock is gone, the chicken is ready to be eaten. So the meat from the chickens and stuff when they're wild is probably not preferred by most people, but after you've fed them for about 30 days, they're much more tender.
Wow, okay.
And so we have several different people in the community. That's our go-to people because they've requested, and a couple of them even have holding pens that whenever we have chickens to get rid of, we just go put them in their pens, and then that's their, food for the table, food for the family.
Oh, okay. Wow. To learn more about Kani Wildlife Control and the various services they offer, visit their website at kaniwildlifecontrol.com.
Okay. Sounds good.
Thank you
Good
so
luck.
much.
Thank you very much.
Okay, bye.
All right. Bye-bye.
Perhaps one of the first things that people wonder when they arrive on Kauai is, where the heck did these chickens even come from in the first place, and why are there so many of them? Well, if you ask a local that, they're likely to tell you something like this.
They are both descended from my understanding is the native moa that the Polynesians brought when they first came to Kauai or to Hawaii. So mixed with, after, every hurricane, people's chicken coops got blown away. So we have, the barnyard varieties of, Rhode Island Reds and Plymouth Rock Hens and Bantams, and they all, kind of get together and and have babies.
That was Joanna Carolyn again. Basically, this common understanding says that the chickens are a result of interbreeding. The chickens that were brought over by the Polynesians when they arrived on the islands, and by the way, those chickens are called red jungle fowl, interbred with domesticated chicken. And there was an explosion in the population of chickens in the aftermath of two specific hurricanes, Hurricane Eva in 1982 and Hurricane Iniki in 1992. But is this actually the case? In order to figure that out, I talked to an evolutionary biologist.
My name is Eben Gehring, and I'm an assistant professor of biology at Nova Southeastern University.
In 2015, Dr. Gehring and a team of researchers from Michigan State University published an article focusing on the genetic makeup and ancestry of Kauai's chickens. So, what did the research tell you? What new light did it shed on our understanding of, well, for example, like where these chickens came from?
Yeah, so there was, of course, we asked people on Kauai, and we read in both scientific literature and popular literature to see what stories were around about where these chickens came from. And we saw some people reporting that these were entirely, pure red jungle fowl, that descendants of these Polynesian introduced birds. And we also saw people saying that those birds had gone completely extinct in the Hawaiian Islands, and that they'd been replaced by a purely domestic feral population. So our genetic data were able to show that the truth is somewhere in the middle. So the genes that we find in the chickens of Kauai are, some of them have domestic origin, and some of them have a closer affinity to red jungle fowl, and also match genetic data that were obtained from subfossils from the Pacific region that predate European contact with the Pacific, and thus the potential for domestic chicken, genes to be in the pool. So I hope I've put that clearly enough, but let me see if I can summarize. So we found there were genes that were present in Pacific Island chickens before Europeans arrived that are still present in the Kauai population today. But we also found some genes in this population that must have come from European introduced domesticated chickens. So it's a diverse, what we call admixed or hybrid gene pool. And you've got some chickens on Kauai that they may be found nowhere else on Earth, because they're a unique combination of these birds that were introduced centuries ago, and then these birds that underwent separately a domestication process that modified them, and then interbred with the wild Polynesian introduced jungle fowl of Kauai Island.
So there's evidence that at least part of the lineage goes all the way back to the first group of chickens brought over when people first arrived in Hawaii?
So possibly, yes. These are very tricky scientific questions. So we can say that that a DNA sequence that was present in the Pacific region before European contact exists in birds that live on Kauai today. But we can't rule out the possibility that maybe at some point a few centuries ago, the Kauai population, in theory, could have been completely wiped out. And then maybe those genotypes were reintroduced from someplace else. So that remains a possibility that we can't conclusively exclude.
Okay, so the research shows that yes, the red jungle fowl and domesticated chickens have interbred in order to create the chicken that you see running around Kauai nowadays. But if you've never been to the island, maybe you're wondering, do they even look any different or behave any different from the chicken that you've seen all your life? Well, the answer to that question is yes, but also it's a bit complicated. The chicken on Kauai are known to be a bit more colorful than your average barnyard chicken, and that is in large part due to the fact that they have those genes that came from the red jungle fowl. The classic coloration of a red jungle fowl is red, black, and green. Also, they have gray legs and a relatively small body. But perhaps one of the most interesting features of the red jungle fowl is the vocalizations.
The feral chickens on Kauai are smaller than a backyard chicken. They have smaller combs, and they have a range of vocalizations, but the crows of the roosters sound different than a barnyard chicken in North America would tend to sound.
In what way is it different? Like, is it easily recognizable to like the average person?
Yeah, so there's a difference in the cadence and in the pitch. So a domestic chicken, domestic rooster, the average domestic rooster call would sound something like and the red jungle fowl's call is higher pitch.
Yeah.
It ends abruptly and it has fewer syllables, so it's something like that.
Yeah.
Now, the chickens on Kauai, you'll hear this entire range from birds that sound like red jungle fowl, and many of them look like red jungle fowl, to birds that are bigger bodied, that have some other domesticated traits like yellow legs or certain types of combs that were bred into chickens, and they'll have a more sort of classic sounding rooster crow. Yeah, so you see a lot of variation there. And let me just say one last thing, though, that part of the reason it's hard to answer these questions is because there's also a ton of variation out there. Just like with dogs, when you look across dog breeds. So if you ask what is a dog, what does an average dog look like? Well, you've got your Great Danes and your Chihuahuas and everything in between. The same is true for domestic chickens. So the broilers that are raised by the billions annually for human consumption, well, they have a standard look and size and behavior. But for people they're really enthusiastic about some of the rarer breeds of chicken, they know there's a tremendous amount of diversity just among the domestic chickens as well.
But what about the hurricanes? Does Dr. Gehring's research shed any light on that? Are they the reason why the population of chickens has exploded in the past few decades?
We will probably never conclusively be able to say if it was the hurricanes that caused the expansion, the population increase of Kauai's feral chickens. And then if you ask people who live there, you'll find people that will say they don't need science. They were there, they saw it, and they absolutely know that it happened. Well, it happened one way or the other, and that depends on who you ask.
Sure.
So thanks for asking, though, about the scientific side of things. Here's what we can say. So first, we do have to acknowledge that domestic genes were present in the Kauai birds before those two major storms. We know that because naturalists observed and reported some morphological evidence of domestic genes in that gene pool. So if you see a bird with some white feathers or yellow legs, then you know that that's not a pure red jungle fowl gene pool. There's been some admixture between chickens and red jungle fowl. And they do seem to love each other because most places where they come in contact, they readily interbreed. Even within the native range of the jungle fowl, this is a big problem because as you get more and more human population density and more chickens, you've got more and more interbreeding, and we're sort of losing that original species because of the introduction of these domesticated genes. But here's the other thing. So we do know also from some naturalist reports that a few decades ago, the birds on Kauai were reported to be more jungle fowl-like than they look to us. And I say they look to us when we take a careful look. So we're looking at how often do we see traits that we know have a genetic basis, and where if we see a chicken that looks a certain way, then we know it's carrying some domesticated genes. A really good example of this is the yellow legs I've mentioned several times. So there's just one gene in the whole chicken genome that will determine if a bird has yellow legs or not. And no red junglefowl have yellow legs. That's a whole nother interesting story. I
think
gene,
it's gray. I was reading the paper.
Yes.
Gray.
Yeah,
okay.
they're sort of slate colored. So the gene that makes yellow legs was introduced during the domestication of the chicken from a different species called the gray junglefowl. It's sort of the next closest relative of the chicken and the red junglefowl. Okay, so we see we know that we see a lot more domestic-like traits in the Kauai population now than was there a few decades ago. We also know that population grew exponentially after those hurricanes. And so those two bits of evidence, they don't prove that the hurricanes caused this influx of domestic genes into this sort of wild Kauai gene pool, but they're at least consistent with that idea, which is also the one that we heard most often in speaking with Kauai residents about their chickens. So most people told us, well, chickens have always been here, but they increased dramatically after these storms. It would make sense. It would make sense to us that, if you look at pictures of what Kauai looked like in the aftermath of those storms, they were devastating. And anybody who had some backyard chickens would be busy tending to other things. And this may create a situation where chickens now need to wander off and figure out how to fend for themselves. So that could certainly catalyze a population of feral fowl. And the very last thing I'll say on that, unless you have more questions, is that there are some genetic tools that you can use to estimate the point at which two lineages began hybridizing. And people have developed these tools to study migration of human populations around our planet. And they do tend to coincide fairly well in cases where there's some anthropological evidence to suggest when two populations met on Madagascar, or when they crossed from this island to the next one.
Right.
So those tools do seem to, these genetic analysis tools that are pretty new, they do seem to be working fairly well at estimating historical exchanges of genes between populations. And we tried running those on the Kauai population. So this is something my collaborator is working on, and that we should be hopefully publishing sometime soon. But the estimate that came out of those analyses for the major episode of domestic feral admixture on Kauai, it does coincide pretty well with those storms. So I believe it was 30 to 50 generations or something in that arena.
Right.
So all our evidence suggests that there was some admixture that happened after these storms. Can we really say it was the hurricanes? I don't know.
The research of Dr. Gehring and other scientists has allowed us to better understand Kauai's chickens. But that's not where the story ends. So aside from simply understanding better where these birds possibly came from, their genetic makeup, what would you say this research has to offer us in a broader sense?
Oh, there's so many different things. I really do. I think it has so many so many answers to that question. I would say for a general non-scientific audience, to my mind, one of the foremost things is just calling people's attention to the fact that we didn't just create chickens out of nothing, that these were domesticated by humans from wild animals, that, the descendants of those animals still live in Asia today. And I think it's really important to know that, given how much we rely on these animals for food, for eggs and meat. It seems to me like a sort of ethical or humanitarian duty to know just a little more about them. But in terms of specific things we can get from this research program, well, I could mention a few. So I also think that there's been so much research in the past there's been extensive research and is extensive ongoing research into wild animals that live in wild places. And that's a wonderful thing. We learn so much from those research programs. And then we have a lot of research in like agricultural settings where we're trying to figure out how to grow, plumper pigs or healthier cows, things like that. But these feral animals really, they live right in the middle. And people do, so ecologists sometimes study them to try to figure out how they're impacting wild animals. And this is a very important question. But it's just really interesting to me that science has, basic science has largely ignored these animals, even though they're extremely numerous. There aren't a lot of places that you can go where there aren't feral animals, and so I think the more we can learn about whether and how this unique situation of having been shaped by domestication and then going back into a wild environment, whether and how that makes your biology a little different from the biology we know from all our studies of other organisms. I think there's a lot of value in that. And, that we can get a lot more specific. So we can ask questions like, okay, so our poultry industry, most people have probably heard about bird flu and about how concerned people are about this virus, perhaps jumping from domestic poultry into humans, and or about disease outbreaks in poultry, kind of, wiping out farms and threatening our food supply. So how do you deal with that? One thing you might think of first is, how does the chicken immune system work? How do chickens fight off disease? And are there things that we could do to breed hardier, sturdier, healthier chickens? Well, one way you could do that is you can think about these feral chickens as it's an evolutionary experiment. You've thrown chickens into this complex environment where they're exposed to all kinds of new microbes that aren't, present in factories or farms, because they're running through the underbrush and they're interacting with all the animals in those landscapes, and the fittest will survive and reproduce. And so if you look at those chickens after enough generations have gone by, then the genes that are left in those birds are the ones that they're well suited to that environment. They can fight off the local pathogens. They can tolerate whether it's the high temperature, the drought if they're over on the dry side of an island. So if we can characterize the genetic adaptations that are emerging in these feral animals, we can use them in production settings to make animals healthier and better adapted to different kinds of environmental conditions.
It's pretty clear that Dr. Gehring really has a special place in his heart for these chickens, and so I had a suspicion that maybe, just maybe, he might still have a few things to remind him of all that time he spent with the chickens of Kauai. Do you happen to have any chicken souvenirs, any artwork, anything from your time on Kauai?
I do, yeah. How did you know that?
I
I love the fact that these feral birds have become so integrated into the local island culture of today. Mm-hmm. I think it's really neat. And yeah, I have a whole, a fairly large collection of refrigerator magnets that I've, collected, and some of them are, very serious, kind of celebrating the chicken. A lot of them are humorous. They have little, the chickens are saying something funny or carrying surfboards or whatever. And that's my main collection. I'm not really somebody who would otherwise, want to amass a giant collection of chicken refrigerator magnets. But when I see it, it just reminds me that, that these birds they really have a place in this landscape, and not just the ecosystem, but the cultural ecosystem of the islands. And that fascinates me.
The 2015 article mentioned in this interview is titled Mixed Ancestry and Admixture in Kauai's Feral Chickens. If you would like to read the full version of the article or just learn more about Dr. Gehring's research, please use the links provided in the show notes for this episode. Transmissions from Hawaii is a production of Wasabi Magazine. It's produced in the beautiful city of Honolulu, Hawaii by me, Tony Vega. For a full list of our guests, as well as links to anything mentioned on the show today, please take a look in the show notes in your podcast app, or you can visit transmissionsfromhawaii.com. We're also going to be posting full transcripts for every episode there. If you enjoyed the show, then please remember to leave a review in your podcast app. And don't forget to tell a friend or a family member about the show. Please help us spread the word about it so that we can grow an audience and turn this into something that we can do over the long term. We really want to keep doing shows like this. We want to keep telling stories like this about Hawaii, but we need your help to do that. So please help us spread the word. We'll be back in about a month with episode 2, and that one is going to be all about something completely different. Mahalo for listening, and see you next time on Transmissions from Hawaii.